Great. We'll start all over again. So welcome everybody. It's now afternoon. I'm a little off on a time zone here. I'm Polly Parsons, the president and CEO of the Alliance for Academic Internal Medicine, and I'm incredibly grateful to one of our esteemed colleagues, Tracy Wolowitz, who's the Senior Vice President for Regulatory Affairs and the Chief Communication Officer for Intealth, who very quickly helped put together this webinar with us because we know there are a lot of questions that our members have around our international medical graduate community. And I really want to thank her for being here. She's going to start with a little bit of background information, and then if people can put their questions in the chat, I'll try to monitor those, and we'll try to make sure we answer as many as we possibly can. So Tracy, I'm going to turn it over to you. And again, thank you so much.
Terrific. Thanks, Polly. Hi, everyone. As Polly said, I'm Tracy Wolowitz. I've been with Intealth for quite some time. And for my entire career, I've been involved with J1 physicians and physician immigration. So I'm really happy to be here with you all today. I'm kind of sad that I have to be here with you all today because there's so much going on related to physician immigration. But we are very excited at Intealth with the match results on Friday. It was a record year for IMGs, which is really encouraging for us. There were more IMGs in the match, foreign national IMGs in the match than we've seen in quite some time, and more actually matched. So we're really excited about that. And we think, if my math is correct, between US citizen IMGs and foreign national IMGs, about 45% of the physicians who match to first-year categorical physicians are IMGs. So this is, I think, a really important topic for all of you. I'm going to begin before answering your questions by telling you a little bit about what we're watching at Intealth and why we're watching it. Not to alarm you, because we don't want you to be alarmed. I want you to be encouraged that we're working on this. We watch these closely. About 2 years ago, we brought in a government relations person to work on our team, specifically to watch issues like this, because we know that we are the voice for IMGs in this country. We know that policymakers need to know and understand the importance that they are, not just to internal medicine programs, but to healthcare in general in the United States. So I'll begin. The first thing that we're watching, and you've probably heard about in the news, it's been widely reported, especially in the New York Times and papers like that, is a travel ban, a potential travel ban or travel restrictions.
Hey, Tracy, it's Polly. I'm really sorry to interrupt. There's a bit of a gray bar on your screen that's covering part of your slide. I don't know if you can see it.
Can't see it.
I don't know how to fix it.
I don't see it. It's not on my screen.
Sheila, do you have any ideas?
My guess is it's probably a resolution issue on Tracy's, and there it goes away.
Is it gone?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, then. Perfect. So the first thing we're watching are these travel bans. And what we're hearing and what has been leaked from the administration is that there will be 3 tiers of the travel ban. Now, the information on this slide was recent as of last week, and it was sourced from the National Law Review. I do want to caution everybody, though, that these countries, the countries in each of these tiers has changed almost daily. And so I wouldn't focus so much on the countries that are listed, but I do want to tell you a little bit about what each of the tiers will likely mean. There will be a first tier or a red tier. And in that tier, all citizens from those countries will be barred from entering the United States. Those countries are likely to mirror the countries that were part of President Trump's first travel ban in 2017 in his prior administration. The orange tier, or the second tier, those citizens would face higher scrutiny and would be subjected to mandatory in-person interviews in order to receive a visa. We do think, we're hearing, and we hope it's true, that non-immigrant visa classifications will be exempted from this orange tier. Non-immigrant visa classifications include J1s and H1s. So those are the two that are most commonly used for GME. So we're hopeful about that. And then the final tier, the yellow category, they will not be restrictions on individuals, but countries listed in that tier will be given a certain amount of time, 60 days, we believe, to address concerns from the administration or be at risk to move to one of the other categories. So they will have 60 days to address screening and vetting concerns. And so those are the three basic categories of the travel ban that we expect. Obviously, the first tier, the red tier, is the one we're watching most closely. And what we will do is seek a national interest exemption for physicians should this actually happen. We're prepared to do that. We've been working internally to kind of figure out what that will look like. But that is a possibility. That did happen in the 2017 restrictions. And so that's something that you all should be thinking about and know that we're working on. The second thing that we're watching is something that you may recall from the last time President Trump was in office, and it's related to something called duration of status. And I'm sorry, Polly, now the screen is frozen and I can't advance the slides. So I didn't know what to do there.
Do you want to quickly email your slides to Sheila and maybe screen share them?
Sure will. Can you see them now if they're in this instead of in full? Can you see them now?
We can, but now there's a gray box that kind of is in the upper right-hand corner for us.
Again?
It's a different gray box, but it's definitely, yeah.
Okay.
Now it's gone enough that if you could leave it in this mode, we can see everything.
Okay. So let's talk about duration of status. Duration of status is an issue that came up at the end of the previous Trump administration in 2020. It would significantly modify the admission and extension procedures for non-immigrant students, exchange visitors, and foreign media representatives. It's that middle group, exchange visitors, that we need to talk about today. Exchange visitors are J1 visa holders. And the administration's goal is to replace duration of status with fixed time periods for admission. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that in just a second. In this teal box at the bottom here is the title of the proposed rule the last time it was introduced. Before I give you a little more detail on duration of status specifically, I think it's really important to know, and sometimes this gets a little bit confusing, the difference between visa and visa status. The visa is an entry document, as I'm sure some of you know, that allows somebody to enter the United States. It can expire once one of your residents is here. So somebody could be in one of your programs in an internal medicine program for 3 years on an expired visa, as long as they don't leave the country. We like to call it, it's like the admission ticket that gets you into the amusement park. But once you're in the park, you don't need that ticket that got you in. Visa status, however, is what allows an individual to live and train and work in the United States. And that must remain valid throughout the entire duration of stay. And that, for J1 visa holders, is conferred by these two documents that you see on your screen. Form DS 2019, that is the form that Intealth that we issue to our J1 physicians. And the document on the right is Form I-94. That's conferred at the border by U.S. Customs and Border Protection. And you'll see here the class of admission right now as J1s enter is J1 admitted until DS, or duration of status. What that means is, as long as physicians hold a valid DS 2019, the document on the left, their status remains. So as they renew their sponsorship through us, their status is automatically extended. What the government is likely to propose, what we think is coming down the pike within weeks, is this. What you see on the right now, an end date, which will be based on the document to your left. So because right now, sponsorship through Intealth is renewed annually based on contracts and progression in training, every year, a physician's sponsorship will expire, and they will have to renew that status through the government, either through USCIS or through travel abroad. So as you can imagine, that if that comes to fruition, will be extremely problematic for the close to 17,000 J1 physicians that we're sponsoring. There's no clarity on how right now it would be assigned to current J1 physicians. Obviously, we don't know how this will be released or what the proposed rule this time will look like. We do believe there will be a comment period, but if there isn't, we don't know how the grandfathering would take place. That's the worst case scenario. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that because we do believe there will be a comment period. Last time it was only 30 days, so it may be a brief one. We will, if there is a 30-day grace or comment period, we'll get closer to July 1st, and we will have renewed most of our continuing positions. And they will then have end dates into 2026. So it gives us some time to work on this issue and to have physicians excluded, like we're going to try to do with the travel ban. The best case scenario altogether is if we can have physicians excluded from the rule altogether. We've been successful in other endeavors, such as during the pandemic, when embassies and consulates were closed all over the world. And we were able to work with the Department of State to have visas granted only to physicians. In the spring of 2020, physicians were the only ones who were coming here to train, were the only ones who were granted visas because they were deemed mission critical by the government. So there is some precedent for physicians being excluded from some rules. And that is what we're working on and what we're focused on. So I'm going to stop the share there, Polly, and I know that's a lot of information to throw at people at one time, but I think it lays a good foundation for some questions.
I think it lays a great foundation. Thanks. So I'll start. It's probably worth you reiterating what happened the last time Trump was in office and how you were able to actually overcome a lot of the challenges then, so people can really understand how much Intealth does even at baseline, which will be reassuring, I think.
I'd be happy to. So the first time we'll start with the travel restrictions. J1 physicians, by and large, by the time the injunctions and the restrictions went through the courts, physicians were by and large exempted from the travel. What's commonly known as the ban. They were really just restrictions, not just, but they were restrictions the last time around. And so we didn't have to focus too much on the impact. But what we did do is we stood up a website or web page on our website. We kept programs, DIOs, program directors informed along the way with our understanding at each iteration of that travel ban. And then we posted what we emailed to program directors and DIOs on that web page so that we could be a resource for the program. With respect to duration of status, the last time it came up, we were able to galvanize the House of Medicine, what we call the House of Medicine, and our partners. And we worked with them to submit a comment letter to the proposed rule. And simultaneously, we were able to contact people pretty high up and work with people pretty high up in the Department of Homeland Security to slow down the progression of the duration of status rule to the point where it came up against the end of the previous Trump administration. So it pretty much died because it didn't get passed into a final rule before he left office. And so that was very successful. The duration of status issue, it isn't just an Intel or a physician issue. There are 300,000 people in the United States in J visa status, everything from students to researchers, to professors, to au pairs. And so the last time this came up in the Federal Register, about 32,000 comments were submitted. It was people really felt some sort of way about it, not just us. But we did put out a toolkit to program directors the last time, and we'll do the same thing this time and ask everyone to submit their comments too, because there is obviously voice in numbers, and we're going to need everybody to really have the IMG voice heard.
Thanks. Just a reminder to everybody, feel free to put your questions in the chat or in the Q&A, and I'll start. There are a couple. I'm following both now with two sets of eyes. Well, Eric is answering the questions in the chat at the same time. One of the ones that he's working on is how to best protect residents traveling back to countries that may be at risk but not on the initial list, for example, Lebanon. People are worried about their ability to re-enter. So this is for residents that are already here, residents and fellows, in terms of going back.
So we did send an email to program directors a couple of weeks ago, specifically advising physicians who we think are going to be in that red tier specifically, but anywhere in that travel, in those travel restrictions, that they not travel. It's just not a good idea right now. Obviously, we can't tell people what to do, but I wouldn't do it if it were up to me, or if I were a program director. I would really encourage my trainings unless absolutely necessary, because we just really don't know what's going to happen. What I can tell you is right now, to date, we haven't had anybody from any country. We haven't heard anything, people having any more difficulty re-entering than at any other time, but things can change day to day.
The other one that's come up is, there are several questions that I think you've already answered, which is, could the DS 2019 be issued for the duration of the program instead of annually? Sounds like that's the new rule that's going to go into effect, that it can't. But did you want to elaborate on that?
So historically, the Department of State has wanted us to issue them only in 1-year increments because of the progression in training, the annual contract, to make sure that physicians are where they say they are, and that they are advancing in the training program, because it's obviously not guaranteed that they advance every year. What we have worked out with them is that as long as we can develop a process that's implementable, and right now we're not there yet, but we're working on a process by which we could conceivably issue a form for the full duration of a residency, but still require the annual renewal. Much like I hear some licensing boards do, right? You get a license for the training program, but you have to check in annually, because there is a government form called the I-644 that we have to collect annually. And there's the annual contract that we have to collect. And we have to update things like the salary from the DS 2019, et cetera. So we have to have an annual check-in, and we want to be able to be more accommodating should things like this happen again.
Great. I'll just kind of go in order a little bit. There's one about residents. It says residents who are on a J1 are required to go to their home country each year to get their visa stamped.
No, that is exactly why I wanted to take a minute to explain the difference between visa and visa status, because there is not a lot, but we do hear there's that misperception that people have to travel every year. They don't.
Yeah, that was my understanding as well. The other one that I think probably is a burning issue for everybody is, first of all, it's a thank you to you. And then what advice do you have for program directors who've matched residents from the red tier countries, since we have 6 weeks from the program start date for them to arrive?
So J1 physicians can arrive 30 days. So they can't really come until June. They can't arrive until 30 days before their start date. I want to remind everybody that the issue I referenced with COVID, embassies and consulates closed down 3 days after the match in 2020, and there wasn't even air travel at that time, nor were there visas being granted. So honestly, we didn't know what we were going to do. It was, it's more time than you think. That's my way of saying it seems like there's not a lot of time, but there's more time than you think. We do have some time to work on it. We're going to work on it. I mean, it's not an option for them not to get here. That's how we're approaching it. It's not an option for them not to get here. And so that is the attitude with which we're attacking this. I know that's not a good enough answer, but that's the answer we have. We are dedicated. We are meeting with all of our partners in academic medicine tomorrow. All the alphabet soup that you can think of. We have a meeting with them tomorrow. We're talking with legal experts on Wednesday. So we are attacking it from all sides, and we're not going to get.
Thank you. There are a couple of questions regarding that some residents who've matched prefer H-1B visas instead of J-1s. There are a few about that particular issue. Do you want to comment on is one recommended versus not, and the differences between them potentially?
So, sure, I can. There are differences. The J-1 is valid. You can hold a J-1 for 7 years. Sometimes you can get an extension depending on the training pathway for 8 years. We usually see that in cardiology, for example. You can't do electrophysiology in 7 years. You need an 8th year to do that. And the Department of State approves us that kind of sponsorship. H-1Bs, you can be in training for typically 6 years. So the duration is different. The J-1 carries what's called a 2-year home physical presence requirement, meaning you have to return to the home country for a period of 2 years before being eligible to come back to the United States in HK or L visa status. The H does not carry that. It carries what's called dual intent, meaning you can come on an H and then automatically convert, or when you finish training, convert to another visa status. The J does have the possibility to waive that 2-year home country requirement and convert to an H, typically to work in a medically underserved area of the country. The fees are different. H-1B fees have to be paid entirely by regulation by the teaching hospital. It is, you cannot, as a teaching hospital, have the applicant pay for any of the fees. The J-1 fee, it's $370 for the application, and the applicant can pay for that. So the fees are a little bit different. And it's really up to the teaching hospital which one they support. And quite honestly, it usually comes down to money. It can be expensive to have a lot of J's in your program, or I'm sorry, H's in your program. And so it's really up to you which one you prefer and which one you support as a teaching institution.
Thanks. There was a question about whether or not Intealth offered one-to-one counseling for trainees. Eric has answered it in the chat, but I'm just going to reiterate the answer in case people can't see the chat, because I'm not sure how people are accessing everything. So Eric Hombo, who's the CEO of Intealth, said, no, you do not offer one-to-one counseling services, but do have folks available to answer any questions. Any questions through the EVSP unit. And please also encourage folks to take advantage of the wellness resources as well as ACGME. The Headspace app is free to J1 IMGs. Did you want to elaborate on any of that, Tracy? Because I just read what I saw. So
EVSP is our exchange visitor sponsorship program. That's the team that handles the J1 visa processing and sponsorship. We have a team of regional advisors, and we have a phone support staff dedicated to the J1 program. Applicants, prospective J1 physicians and current J1 physicians frequently call in, and they will get personalized attention when they call in. We're also available for the teaching hospitals. At every teaching hospital that has a J1 physician, we have at least one person. It's called a training program liaison, or a TPL. And those TPLs know who their regional advisor is. There's a dedicated person in our staff for that. So there is some personal life attention that way as well. Eric is referring to the Headspace app, which is something this year for the first time we've provided to all J1 physicians free of charge. It is a scientifically backed wellness app. I don't know if you're all familiar with it, but we were really excited to be able to do that. It's just one thing that we can do to come alongside our physicians, because they are all over the country. We obviously can't be with all of them, but we wanted to be able to provide that for them. And with that comes license for them to then share it with 5 of their friends or family too. So it's not just for them, it's also for people in lives.
Thanks. There are a couple of other sort of themes. One is, and it's been a little bit answered in the chat, there's a lot of concern about what should residents be told about social media and what they should do on social media. So I can kind of tell you what's come through the chat of, A, be careful, B, it sounds like that some institutions are giving guidance to kind of scrub social media before they leave the country. Have you heard anything or anything that would be helpful in that regard?
So this isn't new with this administration, although it sounds like this administration may be looking at it more closely. There's always been, as part of the visa interview process, something called administrative process. So if there's any sort of red flag, a visa applicant can be referred to something called administrative processing. And during that, it's not unusual for the government to look at someone's social media history. And so it's definitely, something we've not had physicians, I'm trying to think, we've not had physicians really stopped or not granted a visa that I can think of because of their social media history. But obviously there's been recent events and a physician in the news for just such a thing. So I would caution, if there's anything, questionable in someone's social media history, it can be uncovered.
Great. Thanks. The other question that's come up is, and this is beyond my ken, if people can't leave the country and renew, quote, a visa, how do they get their driver's license renewed? So I don't know the link between those, so maybe you can give background for
They
people.
don't need a visa to get their driver's license renewed. They need their visa status renewed. And so that's their DS 2019 and their I-94 that I showed on the one slide. So as long as that visa status is valid, they're fine. Again, that visa, the visa and the passport is the ticket that gets them in the country. Once they're in the country, the visa status is what gets them on the rides, lets them have fun here.
Or not, if it's a roller
Yeah,
coaster,
or
it's
not.
really scary. So I think people are continuing to look for guidance on really what to tell residents on visas, so that they may not travel. Can we tell them not to travel? As one person said, I quote, "I suspect we cannot make do not travel part of the job description." So obviously not. I think the guidance you've already sent out, which is to carefully consider travel, makes sense. But is there any further details on that you wanted to share?
I think physicians from countries not in one of the tiers, and it remains to be seen what those countries are. Be cautious, right? You don't want to be the guinea pig. We'll know in pretty short order if there are issues with people from those countries traveling. The countries on those lists, I'd be very cautious. And what we will say, we already have some communications, and we will send a communication to programs when the travel restrictions drop. I would actually even go so far as to consult with an immigration attorney if I wanted to travel, because it could be extremely risky to try to get that in. If you're on that red list, you can't travel because the government is telling you won't get a visa if you come back, if you seek to come back in. So absolutely not for the countries on the red list.
Thanks. One question is, they've matched several people that are international medical graduates. They want to reach out to those matched interns who are coming on J1 to sort of welcome them, et cetera. They don't want to scare them or create panic. So when do we sort of anticipate knowing a little bit more about time frames in terms of letting incoming residents know when we think, for example, the travel ban list will be set or not, all the other pieces? Any idea?
So we were hearing at the end of last week that it would be this weekend. It wasn't.
I know.
It's imminent. That's all we can say. It's, as Eric Combo and I were meeting earlier today, and today seems to be tariff day. There seems to be a lot of news about tariffs today. So I don't know if that means we won't hear anything about immigration or it doesn't mean anything at all, but we think it's imminent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a relatively specific question, but I think I can make it general. So if an applicant went to this is the specific. If an applicant went to med school in Syria but did residency in Qatar and is applying for a visa from Qatar, will that be an issue? So
It depends on the passport, and that's a really good point. A lot of the physicians that come through the J1 program that we see have dual citizenship. So if I would suspect this person doesn't, because the physicians we see primarily from Weill Cornell, Qatar, they have legal status in Qatar, but they don't have citizenship. But if, say, a Syrian has citizenship in Syria and the UK, travel on that UK passport. Do not try to travel on a Syrian passport. If you have an option, travel on the one that's not on.
There's a question about, we match someone who's on an L visa. They're not familiar with that. Is there a process to switch to J?
They can switch to J. It would just be, they would have to, if they're in the country, I would say reach out to me outside of this call, because there are probably nuances that we need to look at. It would take us down a rabbit hole right now.
Here's an interesting one. This is a program that's actually had, quote, non-American looking residents approached by ICE officers to question. It was one, it sounds like. He was an American citizen and he knew how to respond. We're concerned about our J1s not knowing how to appropriately respond. Do you have any guidance that we should share with these residents if they're approached by ICE?
We have not done that to date, but that's a really good question. Thank you for bringing it up. We've not heard of any of our J1s. Historically, J1s have not been the subject of kind of ICE investigations. We have heard frequently that because the hospitals are sponsors of the H's, that ICE would pop into hospitals, even, this administration and others, to do a site visit or to check in. So it's not been so much an issue for our J1 physicians. But in this current environment, it's definitely something that we need to talk about.
Yeah. And there was a question, which is going back to H1 and J1, do you think the administration would be more friendly to one over the other, or does that not matter? Eric answered, and feel free to amplify, great question. Some in the administration are hostile to H1Bs in general, while others are not, so not clear at this point where this will land.
That's fair. I mean, we've studied Project 2025, we've studied the American Foreign Policy Institute, some of the things that seem to be informing the current administration, and it's exactly as Eric said. J's don't seem to be the focus, but then there's duration of status, which we would have thought would have risen to where it has. So
More to come.
yeah.
So there are two sort of more general questions that are probably hard to answer. And these two are back to back. One is, should we have home country as a mandatory field in ARIS, or instead of home country, should ARIS ask country of citizenship? Thoughts on that in terms of that being part of the ARIS application? You don't want to discourage applicants from countries, but you also want programs to have some ability to kind of know what they may have to gear up for. So thoughts on that question?
So my gut is that would lead to real discrimination, and
Yeah.
Home country, or there are, we, as I just said, many, many positions that I see have dual citizenship in different countries. And so just because you were born, the first country of citizenship is Syria, it doesn't mean you don't have citizenship somewhere else that will allow you to easily travel.
Yep. So the answer is no for now, for
Mhm.
sure. Another one was, there's a question that I think is going out to the general audience, which is how long do people wait past July if their residents can't get here? Was that a problem in 27, whatever year it was when we did this before? It sounds like the delays didn't occur. Everybody got to basically where they needed to be within a few days of the
Mhm.
date.
We're always about, when we look at what we call on-time arrivals, it's always in around 92-93%. There's always a percentage, and it's usually not why you think. Usually when physicians are late coming to their training programs, it's not because they're outside of the country, it's because they're in the country and they've applied for a change of status through USCIS, and those delays, it can sometimes take a long time for that, and that's usually.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's just more to come, and we'll see what dates, how they go, how they play out. I think I've gotten to the questions on the chat and in the Q&A, but if I'm wrong and somebody's put a question in that hasn't been answered, please repost it. I think the other one that I heard is there's always a little bit of confusion that got heightened by the recent detention of the woman who was on the faculty at Brown. And just to clarify, Intealth works with residents and trainees, residents and fellows, not with faculty, correct?
That's correct. But yes, that's correct. But we do, even though, we don't have any direct contact or anything to do really with H-1B visa holders. During the pandemic, for example, when we were working with embassies to get physicians here, we did work on behalf of hospitals to get their H-1B physicians here too. So we do not limit ourselves with respect to just J-1 training. We do try to help when we can with anybody in your training.
Thanks. I know that some people came in a little late, and I think everybody's looking for ongoing clarification just so they clearly understand it. So there's still a couple of questions. They're kind of back to back here. One is, can you review what the possible change in duration of status is again, just to get, because some people are still a little confused. And then also a corollary to that is how would the I-94 be updated year to year if they get rid of the duration of status?
Duration stats right now, when I'm gonna really try to simplify it. A J1 physician status is renewed automatically when we renew their status or their DS 2019, the form that we issue. It's just automatic every year. What the proposal that we're expecting would do is eliminate that automatic renewal. And so basically, J1 physicians would have their status expire every year, and they would have to apply for renewal or extension of that status, either through travel abroad and reapplying, or through USCIS, which, as I just mentioned in a different context, can take, right now, it can take 3 to 6 months. In 2020, when we looked at it, and you can see these processing times on the USCIS website, it was taking up to 19 months. So clearly that's not an option. It would be extremely problematic because even if it were, even if we could issue multi-year DS 2019s and have somebody's status, it's not likely that the rule would be written in such a way that it wouldn't expire every couple of years anyway.
There's an interesting question now, which is there any perceived additional risk for residents on J1s or Hs who are transitioning to fellowship? And what if there's a small gap in training dates between residency and fellowship? So sometimes they don't start the day one ends.
So, right now, the way the regulations are written, dates have to be contiguous. So there can't be a gap between residency and fellowship. Before, all of this, I'll nicely call it noise, with, with positions, we were talking with the Department of State about potentially allowing for a small gap in training. They have given authorization to pediatrics and to general surgery for us to sponsor for a gap in those two specialties, only because those specialties came to us and said, as a whole, as an entire, they wanted to start their programs late. Surgery on August 1st and peds in the middle of July. And so we were able to get authorization for those two specialties. And we would like to make it more generic and be able to apply it for all the specialties. So we're working on that right now. It's probably on the back burner a little bit.
So is there anything programs should do if it looks like they've got somebody with a gap?
One,
Close it?
yeah, one of them has to close it, either the residency or the fellowship.
Their questions are coming in fast and furious. So this one is, would applying for an extension to take the boards help those transitioning from a J to H for their post-residency jobs?
Yes, we see that all the time. Individuals we are permitted to extend somebody to sit for their boards for up to 6 months. So it's up until the last day of the exam, as long as the exam is held within 6 months. So for example, for those who finish residency, we're allowed to sponsor them until the end of August to take the IMGs.
I know this is difficult to predict, but do you anticipate any complications with those residents on visas who are taking extended leaves, for example, maternity or family leave?
I don't anticipate a problem. What I would say is they need to be cognizant that that time counts against their 7 years IMG or 6 years if they're on an H. And so as they're planning their progression in training, if they want to do subspecialty training, they're going to come up against a time. And so I would say work with us. In the case of J's, there's a form that we ask programs and physicians to sign and fill out when someone's on a leave of absence, not because we want to be big brother, but because we want to come alongside and kind of look at these issues. And particularly if the leave's going to extend, we don't see it so much with maternity or paternity, but we see it when there's an illness, an extended illness.
This one is, any specific advice how we can assist with advocacy to ensure incoming physicians get in safe and sound?
We are going to be reaching out to you. As I said, we'll send you a toolkit for when the comment period is open for duration status. Yes, again, voice and numbers.
Yep, thanks. I think this next question he says he apologizes for a naive question, but I think probably as we have more and more international medical graduates filling more and more of our slots, which is awesome, there'll be more and more program directors who are not as familiar with immigration. So this is about the immigration process in general. So if a matched resident is from Pakistan, can she or he travel to India and then try to get a visa from India?
That's a really good question, because a couple of years ago, I would have said it's difficult. Now, this was under the Biden administration, but last year, the government specifically came out and said, you can apply it in a third country, meaning, yes, if you're from Pakistan, you can apply in India. If you're from Panama, you can apply in England. And so what we advise though is to call ahead. You can contact the embassy or consulate, check on processing times, and make sure that they will give you. That's what we advise.
There's a question, is this toolkit that I think you referred to earlier sent to TPLs to disseminate or to programs directly?
We tend to send to both.
Yep. Thanks. I think I've gotten to all the questions. Eric's been following as well. Eric, do you see anything that we haven't answered? Any additional questions from the audience? I know this is an issue that will continuously evolve. So I'm sure questions will continue to come up. If there aren't additional questions, I really, really want to thank Tracy for doing this very quickly and putting this together, and for Eric in the background, who I didn't acknowledge in the beginning. I guess there's one last, first of all, really great info, calmly presented, very helpful. There was another, which is you advise J1 visa holders to keep their passports on them if stopped by ICE.
They should, yes. I mean, they should have all of their papers. They should have their DS 2019. They should have their passport, not necessarily on them, but they need to know where all their paperwork is for
Yeah.
sure.
And then, go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, I just put my email address in the chat. If anybody needs to or wants to reach out to me or has any follow-up questions, I'm happy.
Thank you.
Mhm.
And it looks like there's one last question, which is based on their observations. We don't need to worry too much about countries on the yellow tier. They have 2 incoming residents from Pakistan, so just want to know how much to work with my director to make sure we're not panicking.
I think the key is to not panic, right? Again, we don't know what's going to happen. As I said at the beginning, 3-4 months doesn't seem like a lot of time. We know it's a lot with this government, with this administration, with any thing that's going on. We don't know what we don't know, and so I would just say stay calm. It's not going to help any of us or our physicians we're trying to get here if we're not. So, and reach out to us if you have a question or things seem to be going topsy-turvy or we're a little bit crazy. Reach out to us. We're happy to come alongside. We're happy, we can do a webinar for your institution. We don't just do them for large groups, we do them for small groups too.
Thanks. And I just want to let the whole group that's on the call know that we actually, as things were evolving really quickly, both Tracy and Eric volunteered to come to AIM Week. And unfortunately, their schedules and the way the schedule worked for AIM Week, we just couldn't find a perfect time for it. But we can certainly, they both offered to do a webinar right after AIM Week as things evolve quickly. So we will continue to stay on top of this and continue to bring information as it's available. I also want to remind everybody that Intealth's been great about sending out updates. We've tried to make sure those are widely distributed across the Alliance, so hopefully you've seen them on all your forums and listservs. And again, I really want to thank Tracy for being here and for being such a calming influence, because I know that that's probably not the way you feel right this second. And so on behalf of everybody that was here, thanks again. And again, if you have questions, you can reach out directly to Intealth. If there are issues that you're starting collectively to hear as groups, let us know. We can bring those as well. So thanks again. And again, I think probably the British keep calm and carry on motto might be the one to use right now, although there are probably other things in people's heads. So, so thank you again. Hang in there, Tracy. Take care. Let us know when you need anything.
Thank you, Polly.
Bye.